Joe, we continue on our deep dives. Today we go down to my home state. See, I've been to your – actually, I didn't go to your home state in New Jersey, but I did go to New York. We go down to Baton Rouge. We talk about the LSU Tigers in another deep dive. People have heard me. They know what I think of this team. I'll kick the ball over to you. What do you think of the LSU Tigers going into 2024?
Is this a trap? Is this a trap that I'm being given the first words on this? Okay.
I always give you the first words because I let you ramble about shenanigans for 40 minutes. And then the people come and hear the truth here. Okay.
All right. LSU's case, as I said in the open, I think that as Brian Kelly has really taken this team and transformed them since he took over from Ed Orgeron, the floor is really high for this program. I think that Garrett Nussmeier, as a lot of people are expecting, could have a really, really huge season. I think that offensively, there's really no question marks. There's not. Even though the fact that they're replacing 2 first-round wide receivers, they had enough depth at the position. They've always recruited well at that position, and they also did an effective job of going in the transfer portal to bring in C.J. Daniels, who was one of the most productive receivers in the country this past year. Offensively, they're going to have no issues. They're not going to produce as many points and yards as they did last year because Jaden Daniels had a ridiculously historic season. But their backbone is going to be offensive production. I just have to say, and I have to bring it up, and I think you agree with me. I don't think, specifically at their defensive line, I think that their secondary has room to improve and to progress. But I feel as though that Brian Kelly has not done a great job of recruiting their defensive line. And also, as we talked about, did a really poor job in the portal, being one of the front runners for any top defensive lineman in the portal. They just weren't even in the conversation. I just feel really uneasy about this situation going into the year. Their best guy is a guy who came from Grand Valley State, and he's fine. He's not great. Mm-hmm. That was the really late ad that they had to bring in.
Yeah, Javier Suggs.
Yeah, big question mark. Big question mark on the D-line.
I agree with you. Offensively, I don't think you're going to put up the same type of offense. I do think there'll be a top 10 offense, though. I still think that they're productive. I think they're going to lean along the offensive line. Joe, I'm going to be a little honest with you. I think that they're going to get to some, hey, man, we're going to line it up and punch you right in the mouth. I don't think they're going to waste any time in doing it necessarily. And I think Brian Kelly wants to slow the game down a little bit more. I think people need to get familiar with Caleb Jackson, the running back. Joe, he was the kid last year that almost had the kick return for a touchdown at 230 pounds. I think ran a 23.6 miles per hour. Super freak. That's why I believe, like, even the thing that went viral of him running the dude over at Mississippi State, it got clipped like the Leonard Fournette thing. Dude's a super freak. Offensively, you're right. Because of their dominant offensive line, I don't really know if I have issues with them. I do question something, though, offensively. I do question depth at running back. And, hey, man, you do have to replace 2 first-round wide receivers, okay? Like, you do. Now, you have a quarterback that's got experience and then takes the next step at that same program with same receivers, so you don't feel as bad going into it. Xavier Thomas, Joe, I think is somebody who was at Mississippi State a year ago that people need to get familiar with too. I agree with you, though, defensively. Look, I do think they're actually more athletic defensively than people give them credit for. By the way, Joe, LSU, who only sent 5 guys in pressure 10% of the time last year, was 40th in the country in sacks. They didn't send pressure at all. I do wonder if Blake Baker does start sending the heat a little bit more because they do have guys on the edge that can rush. What do you do with Harold Perkins? They got athletes in the second and third level. I agree with you in the interior of the defensive line. I don't know what they're going to do at the boundary at corner. I still think the same question marks that they have or had last year is the same question marks that they had going into this year. And I don't think that it's changed. Now, Joe, here's the ultimate question what's going to be for LSU defensively. If you're looking at it as a whole, was it scheme with Matt House or was it personnel?
I think it was a horrible mix of both. I think it was the perfect.
The third thing, is it a horrible mix of both? Yeah. Here's the thing. With guys like Harold Perkins that are out there, and it's not like you don't have a 5-star in Deshaun Womack. It's not like you had a top 32 guy in Braden Swinson. It's not like, Joe, that they didn't recruit at a very high level here. I do think they got a lot of athleticism. I just don't know. I think they got two big areas of weakness that overshadows that. Joe, let's think about it like this. Ole Miss couldn't run on the edge last year. The LSU got pressure on them. It was the interior of the defensive line that got absolutely abused. Secondary, it was what it was. Final point here, and I'll kick it back over to you. It doesn't miss me that you questioned LSU secondary, who was 114th in the country in passing yards allowed, and you wouldn't do Texas. Now, I will remind you that LSU does have the same blue chip ratio as Texas does in their secondary. So I just remind you, you stuck up for Texas's secondary yesterday, and LSU was only 114th, one spot behind them.
Yeah, hold on. I was pulling your chain a little bit when we were pre-show. I said this a second ago when you let me talk first. I think that I'm going to be willing to give the LSU secondary the benefit of the doubt like I did with Texas's, because I think it was the case of mixing and matching, getting young guys in, not really knowing what to do. Secondary is a position where if you don't have experienced players and you don't have the right scheme to match with their talent like they did last year, it leads to disastrous failure. But where I am, and I think where I am like really raising the red flag going, this does not look good, is the interior of that defensive line. If you do not have the bodies that are powerful, that are flexible, that are explosive, that don't just come firing off the ball 100 miles an hour, there was no real replacement for Mason Smith and Justin Jefferson and those guys. Not Jordan Jefferson.
You're talking about, yeah, it's Justin Jefferson. But you're talking about Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr.
No, I'm talking about the defensive line. Well, I mean, who's the other damn defensive?
Jordan Jefferson,
Smith,
and Kai Wingo.
Those are three guys that not all of them were very consistent last year. They're gone. So not only are you replacing a group that struggled, who the heck are you replacing them with? And I look at their schedule knowing the one game that actually might scare me a little bit that you're not going to agree with. It helps them that they're playing Alabama at home. But I look at Alabama's interior offensive line. That's one of the best parts of their O-line. They've got two really good guards that the NFL really freaking likes in Tyler Booker, and I forget the name of the other guard that they have. That could be brutal for them if they are smart enough to attack them right up the middle and just run the ball right up the middle in short yardage situations and not overthink it. That could really kill them and hurt them down the line in important games and in close situations.
So we say that all about LSU, but you look at their schedule. Joe, I do think the biggest game on their schedule right now today is obviously USC. You got to start off the year winning and beating USC.
They're going to beat the shit out of them. I don't think that game's going to be close.
Okay, you say that, but we'll see. Okay, Joe, they got two other games on their schedule. I mean, let's say they lose to Ole Miss and Bama, so then they're 10-2, and they're back where they were a year ago. That makes they're going to the playoffs if they go 10-2. Bottom line. They're not going to live at 10 SEC team out that's got 10 wins in the conference.
That's my point, is that their schedule is very favorable to the point where theoretically shit hits the fan. They don't beat either of those teams. A 10-2 SEC team gets in the playoff. They're not a championship caliber team. They're just not. There are more well-balanced, well-rounded teams above them that will beat them in the playoff. They can get there. I just don't know how far they make it. It depends on what matchup they get in the first round. If they get a Big 12 team, I'm sure that they would win.
What if they have to at home at night, Death Valley Tiger Stadium? Do they beat a team that maybe is more talented that comes in there? I mean, look, I agree with the path that you're on here.
Yeah.
Well,
the only thing, other thing I was going to say is, say they have to play. Say they have to play Oregon. Say they have to play Ole Miss. They get a rematch against Ole Miss. Like those are circumstances that would be just terrible, terrible matchups if they get handed some of the more talented teams in the playoff field. And frankly, the real reality here is that LSU being 10-2, not going to the SEC championship game, could be higher seeded than a better team that they face. And what I mean by that is like
Ole Miss.
Like Ole Miss could go to the SEC championship game and have 3 losses and be a lower seed than LSU. and haven't already beaten LSU. That's totally on the table to happen.
Mm-hmm. Could happen. I'm not going to – I've said this. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not putting them in the playoff. Go show me. I'm not putting – yeah, go show me. Because, listen.
They'd have to really shit the bed to not be – it's just like Notre Dame.
I mean, if we're being honest –
they don't have Texas or Georgia.
Well, think about it like this. In year one, they were a game against 5-7 Texas A&M away from being a 10-2 regular season team.
Brian Kelly does like shit in the bed against teams he's supposed to blow out.
Well, that's not a Brian Kelly thing at this place. Les did that shit too. Okay. Les and Ed did that shit too. So I'm not going to put it all on him. That's got to come from within in that locker room and the leadership that you have. I'm not going to put them there because for me, if I come out here and say that they're going to be a playoff team, gets completely misconstrued by a fan base, our own fan base, I'm not going to do it. Joe, they got to prove in these big games. Oh, look, under the last 2 years, Brian Kelly's defense on third down has been atrocious. Atrocious. And he has said this. It's not like I'm just like putting down on the man. He's come out in press conferences and said, hey, we stink on third down. Okay. Thank you for at least admitting it. There are things that they got to prove. I will admit this. Something that I don't think that people have talked about enough. I don't think people understand, though, with LSU, which always happens at this place for whatever reason. Joe, they got some athletes at end, at linebacker, and at safety. If there is some glowing hope on the edges and in that middle, they got some dudes now. I'm not going to take that away from them. I don't think that shit was scheme thing. Like, I could see Harold Perkins. Joe, they ran away from Harold Perkins last year after one game in the interior. Mm-hmm. Okay, against a team that runs counter and trap the whole time. Yes, it's going to be a horrible game for him. Joe, that's not the same player that I saw a year ago. Like, during the spring, it's just Harold. He's not. Now, I'm going to use what I've seen off of it, but we'll just have to wait and see. Secondary and D-line interior do scare me. I will admit, I'm with you 100% there.
So you brought this up with Notre Dame, Texas A&M being the real defining game. I think that this Alabama game is going to be the real defining one. I don't think it's Ole Miss because Ole Miss is going to be a hard-fought battle. It's between two top teams. But I would argue that how they play against Alabama at home is going to really tell us at that point in the season if they're good enough to go on to the playoff. They beat LSU, or if they beat Alabama, or maybe they lose by less than a score, that to me defines that answer of, are they going to finish 10-2? Are they going to go on to be one of the last playoff teams in?
We'll see, man. I'm going to push back on one thing.
Okay.
I don't disagree because Nick Saban is gone and Kalen DeBoer being there. That game means a lot because LSU fans are going to be like, hey, man, Nick's gone. It's time. Like, you can't use that excuse anymore. Mm-hmm. But, man, they can't lose to Ole Miss at home. Not after last year. So I do agree with you on Bama. You lose that Magnolia Bowl at home, them old rich white-haired dudes that pay you all that NIL money who hate Ole Miss more than they hate Alabama. Okay, but I'm just listen to your boy. They would,
I get that. I mean, I don't know the rivalries.
They would accept the loss to Alabama right now before they would Ole Miss.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
The old men that hate Mississippi? Oh, God, yeah.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.